Using the distance and midpoint formula for a basic distance problem or a basic midpoint problem is relatively straightforward, but we do have some special distance and midpoint formulas that may take an extra example or two for you to understand them. The first one is when you want to find the coordinates of a missing endpoint when you're given the midpoint. So first example, find the coordinates of the missing endpoint given that B is the midpoint of AC. Now my suggestion to you is that the first thing you do is draw your segment. So we know B is the midpoint of segment AC. So here's segment AC, B is the midpoint. So these two segments should be congruent. Now the problem is that we know the answer basically, and we know one of the endpoints, but we're missing this endpoint. So we're not going to use the distance formula. We are, of course, going to use the midpoint formula. However, you can't use it as if you have two endpoints because you don't have two endpoints. So we have to change it up a little bit. The first thing you want to do is name the point that you don't know x, y. We know it's a coordinate with an x and a y. Now, you can do the midpoint formula with these two coordinates, the same old midpoint formula you always did. So you take the x value and add it to the x value, x plus 0 divided by 2, and that will give you your x point. Then you take the y value and add it to the y value and divide by 2. And then here's where it's different. We know whatever we get here has to be equal to this midpoint, 5, -6. So it's like Jeopardy. You know the answer and you have to work backwards to find part of the question. So here's the midpoint using the unknown x and y, and here's the answer, 5, -6. So the next thing we want to do, if this is the x value in the answer, then it should be equal to the formula of the x value. So we could say 5 equals x plus 0 over 2. And then you'll use algebra to solve that. You can also do that for the y coordinate. So if the y coordinate is -6, then that should be equal to the y setup. So we over here will get -6 equals y plus 0 over 2. Now to solve this for algebra, of course, we need to get rid of these 2's on the bottom. So we multiply both sides by 2, and we get 10 equals x plus 0. And that means 10 equals x. And over here, multiply both sides by 2, and we get -12 equals, these 2's will cancel, just like they did here, and we get y plus 0. So our y equals -12. So that means that the coordinate that we were looking for, A, must be the x value with 10 and the y value of -12. The setup will be exactly the same every time. So what's important for you to understand is that the endpoints go here and the midpoint goes here. All right, second example. Find the perimeter of the triangle whose vertices are P, which is -2, 4, I, which is -6, -12, and G, which is 10, 8. So imagine we have a sketch here. -2, +4 would be something here. -6, -12 would be here. And 10, 8 might be here. So, oops, that creates a triangle. And we want to find the perimeter. How do we find the perimeter? We find the perimeter by adding up the lengths of all three sides. So how do we find the lengths of each of these sides? We need to find the distance here. We need to find the distance here. And we need to find the distance along this length. So we need to use the distance formula 3 times. Once for PG, once for GI, and one's for PI. All right, so we're going to do the distance formula each time, choosing only two endpoints, P and G in this case. So I'll use this point and this point. So we do -2 plus or minus 10 squared and 4 minus 8 squared. -2 minus 10 is -12. -12 squared would be 144. 4 minus 8 would be -4. -4 squared will be +16. Remember that whether it's negative or positive, when you square it, it will always be positive. And that will give us square root of 160. When you calculate the square root of 160, we should get about 12.65. So to complete this problem, you need to find the distance of GI using I and G, the distance of PI using P and I, and then once you know the three lengths, then you will add them all together. And you want to write the perimeter of triangle PIG is, and it'll be, oops, the perimeter of triangle PIG is the total of all three. So you'll have to add those together. Bring that to class with you tomorrow.